you listened to right here on the game, gave his message to his team ahead of SEC play. This will be cut number 5 here, Dave. Here's what Coach Beamer had to say.
Not much. I mean, Mondays are off days, so we come in on Sundays. We play on Saturday. We had a quick turnaround Sunday, so we were back in here for meetings and practice on Sunday. And the message then was we need to be better, all 3 phases. I mean, win or lose, we come in here on Sundays and we watch, 10 to 15 plays of the night before and show the good and the bad. And there's good and bad in every win and loss. And there was plenty of good Saturday night, and there was plenty of not so good Saturday night. So we watched that, and I think I would hope that I didn't have to make it clear. I think they already knew that Saturday night wasn't up to our standard, whether it be offensively or whether it be how we finished the game in some ways on defense. And then we went out Sunday night. I thought we had a great practice, and our guys knew that it was time for us to, take another step and get better this week, because we've got a big challenge coming in here on Saturday night. And I told them after the game in the locker room Saturday night, I knew the result of the Virginia Tech game because it was freaking 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was here. And I told them that, that we're playing we open up SEC play, and we got a team rolling in here that just ran off, I think, 34 straight points against Virginia Tech and rushed for 260-something yards against them to get their attention pretty quick, that they needed to go home, they needed to go to bed, they needed to get their rest, and let's get back in here on Sunday and get ready to work. And that's what we've done.
I think you look at Carolina's first 2 games, and, Virginia Tech's Power 4 team, but I thought Carolina across the board was a lot more talented, and they ended up winning by a fairly comfortable margin. Obviously, SC State, FCS team, and that, speaks for itself. Competitive game, more than we were hoping it was going to be, but Carolina ends up pulling away there at the very end. But you have to play a lot better this weekend, because you have a team, I don't know if they're on even footing necessarily, because I think Carolina might have more skill overall across the board, but you have a team that has the opportunity to, I think, push you a lot more than the prior 2 teams did.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. This is the first real test on the schedule, and, it might wind up being one of the better SEC teams that you play this year. Vanderbilt, I was listening in on the drive over here, they're loaded, this is the most talent Diego Pavia has had around him. Obviously super talented at the quarterback position, and certainly going to give you a push. And, you got to be able to, show up ready to play. If you come out complacent and flat against Vanderbilt, they're going to, seal the deal in the second half. And, we saw how strongly they played in the second half against Virginia Tech. Clearly a disciplined team up there at Vandy under Clark Lee. So, you got to be ready to play on Saturday. And
Coach Beamer mentioned there, his message to the entire team was, hey, we got to be better at everything. I'd say you feel pretty good about where your defense is as of right now. Obviously, special teams has done far more than anybody would have expected out of them in the first 3 weeks, mainly due to Vakari Swain and his, punt return prowess. But it's the offense that's obviously still catching up. It's the offense is still not a perfect system yet. And as we've alluded to in the past hour, and we let you hear from Case and Henry, there's communication issues on the offensive line, something that, I'm glad he was very honest about, because we say, okay, now we know what the issue is. And if they're communicating better, do they suddenly become a good offensive line? Maybe so. Again, I don't think they suddenly become elite just because they know the play calls better. But if you can have better communication across the front and all 5 of those guys understand their assignments, know everybody's going, then you stand to be somewhat better than you have been.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. I think, if you can get the communication right, I think it, excels a lot of things, excels the run game. You're hitting your blocks on time, you're in sync. Everybody's on the same page, and it starts in the run game. I think that's where you'll see it pay off. And then obviously 16 will get a lot more protection, and we'll see the different looks. Clark Lee, defensive head coach, he's going to bring different looks with this defense. But I think if there's good communication, we'll see that picked up, early, and you just have to adjust as the game goes along.
Yeah, I so desperately want this run game to be consistent, right? And Beamer's talked about it. They were one of the better teams rushing in the SEC last year, despite some of the issues they had on the offensive line. So you feel like they're not far away from making things happen. You just have to see it to obviously believe it. But you can get a good established ground game with 2 experienced backs like Oscar Attaway, Russell Faison, and who knows how many of those other guys that will get consistent carries as the season goes along, but your offense as a whole improves drastically because, again, then you have to account for the run. Then that opens up the pass a little bit more, and Sellers, can have the opportunity to use his feet when he needs to, and all those kind of things that can hopefully, make everything, continue to move in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Offense in the SEC starts at the run game, and I feel like Saturday night there were, a couple ticks off in terms of, hitting the blocks at the right times. I think, there was a couple seal blocks with a receiver in motion, just getting there late and hitting the block. He was still hitting the block, but it was a little late, and, it's the same thing on the offensive line, just got to get in sync, hitting the right blocks at the right time, and also the combination of the running back being patient with the football and waiting for things to open up. But, again, you took your lumps against SC State. You had your fair share of lumps in the run game against Virginia Tech, so you would hope that this week is the week that everything from a communication standpoint gets on track.
I certainly hope so. Again, when you look at what Carolina's schedule is, not that Vandy or Kentucky or Missouri are easy by any means, but they look like more manageable games than what you have coming with a lot of teams that are in. I know Missouri's now ranked at number 25, but a lot of teams that were ranked going into the preseason with very small numbers next to their name, like LSU. Alabama, again, we'll kind of see how they do in the next couple weeks on how tough that's going to be. Obviously, Clemson's still coming up at the end of the year. A&M and Oklahoma, who looks better, and Ole Miss, and all your challenges, the toughest challenges come in that back half of the season. So navigating these first 5 weeks, as we said a lot in the offseason, are paramount to setting yourself up good for that stretch run of very tough teams. And it all starts this weekend with Vanderbilt.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. This is the first real litmus test for your team in SEC play. Again, we've talked about how good this Vandy team is. It's not your daddy's Vanderbilt, right? Again, with the big win last year, even though you've won 16 straight against these guys, this is probably going to be the toughest of those, or of these 17 games that you'll play. And again, they're hungry, they're ready to go. And again, we've seen Oklahoma kind of rise. John Mateer becoming a Heisman favorite now. So your schedule is only getting harder. We'll see what happens to Texas A&M. They've got a big game this week in South Bend. Again, we'll get a litmus test from them as well. Also, still a tough team to play down the stretch. You got to go to Kyle Field at A&M. So again, there's upset potential there. You got to be careful. So yeah, the talent is rising around you. And again, we're not really sure about Bama either.
We'll dive more into Vanderbilt coming up next as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina rolls on. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler, head Joe Machika, Captain Dave along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Again, we are going to be giving away some of the Loyal Lisa Special Teams touchdown contest money coming up on Friday morning at 7:30, $200 to be exact. So go online to 1075thegame.com and find out how you can win that money for Vicari Swain's punt returns that have already happened this season. And again, we'll have that contest rolling through the rest of the season as well. Again, $200 up for grabs coming up on Friday morning at 7:30. So as now we kind of begin to look at Vanderbilt specifically, you mentioned the streak against Vanderbilt, which speaks for itself. And even last year, because Carolina played Vanderbilt after the upset of Alabama, right? The Alabama upset was like early October, I think, and Carolina got them late October, early November, whenever that was. Even then, I don't think we were, it's not fearful, or maybe that's not the right word I'm looking for, really said, wow, that Vanderbilt team is somebody who can come in here and really, mess you up or beat you soundly. But I think after having an entire offseason of hype surrounding Diego Pavia, looking at what they brought back, I think this is the most concerned we've been with the Vanderbilt team in a very long time.
Concerned, excited, Tyler. I think, the ticket prices to this one kind of shows how this fan base feels about it. This is going to be, it was announced as a sellout last night, I think, or yesterday, if not, so it's big. The fan base is excited for it, and a lot of, that goes to Vandy being a better football team, and then they have a quarterback who, has run his mouth and pretty much backed up everything he said he's going to do to this point. And obviously it's the SEC, Tyler. It just means more. So when you have a quarterback on the other side like that, the fan base is going to care. They're going to show up and support their guys.
What do you think of Diego Pavia? Like, what is your actual opinion on him?
I don't know. I certainly have respect for, working your way up from New Mexico State and, into college football.
Well, he was at a military school before that. Like, he's had to really climb the ladder.
Exactly. So, like, he's a seventh year senior.
One of the, because again, he's playing this year because the JUCO stuff doesn't count against him. He's been around a while.
Right. Yeah. So, he's been around for a while, but again, so his story is certainly great. But when you are able to run your mouth and back it up like that, it's pretty impressive. But he continues to do it, right? So you would think, like, and shout out again, more respect to him for dreaming, like setting the goals high. But I honestly, from an opposing standpoint, you can't stand it. Like that's the common factor. And if he's on, it's the age old. If he's on your side, you love him. If he's on the other side, you can't stand him.
No, I respect the confidence a lot. And again, I think we went through a lot of last year hearing Diego Pavia talk, because again, nobody paid this guy attention until the Alabama upset, right? Like, oh, you may have heard, hey, Vanderbilt got a transfer quarterback from New Mexico State. Okay, whatever. I think you may have remembered his name from when he peed on the New Mexico logo a couple years ago. Like, oh, that guy? All right, sure, whatever. But you see how he plays. They beat Alabama. You start hearing him talk. You're like, this guy knows he goes to Vanderbilt, right? He should not have this kind of confidence. You don't deserve to have that kind of confidence playing at Vanderbilt, but I do think it's resonated with the rest of the team, obviously. And I respect that a lot, because he's gone into a place that's been a perennial loser for pretty much their entire history, save for a couple good years with James Franklin. He says, not anymore. No, we're going to win. And I'm sure there were some of his teammates like, dude, where we're at, right? We're at Vanderbilt. We don't win around here. Well, I'm going to. And he has kind of this blind confidence that he goes into every game and every situation believing he's the best guy on the field. And to me, that's half the battle, because if you go out there believing you're going to lose, well, you're probably going to lose. If you go out there believing you're the best blanker on the face of the earth, then you're probably going to do pretty well, or at least give yourself a chance to do pretty well. And that's what I see in Diego Pavia. And I heard the comments from one of the offensive linemen yesterday when asked about Dylan Stewart. And he's like, he's whatever. You know what I mean? And like, from a Carolina standpoint, that infuriates you. You're like, how dare you say that about our potential future first-round pick coming off the edge? But like, I get it. And I can respect it, because like, those guys have the mindset of, we're the best. nobody's going to beat us, and we're going to go in there and show you on Saturday.
Right, absolutely, Tyler. You know, Williams-Brice is a tough place to play if you go in there thinking, oh, no, this might be a long day for us, right? Because as soon as you get there, no matter what expectation you have, it is going to exceed that. It's going to be louder than you think. You know, it's going to feel like the fans are right behind you, that kind of thing. You know, this fan base packs it out and makes it a really tough place to play. So I agree. If you go in there setting the bar like, oh, this one might be a tough one, you're going to lose because, again, you know, you're setting the bar low and, you know, the confidence radiating from Pavia.
And I went back and watched about half of their game against Virginia Tech yesterday, and I looked at the, you know, crowd and atmosphere at Lane Stadium, and it looked pretty good. And Virginia Tech's been down for a couple years, but those people at the beginning of that game were believing. Those people were bought in. They were ready. They were charged up, excited. Now Vanderbilt took the air out of the balloon in the second half and ended up being a pretty light crowd by the end of the thing. But for a lot of that game, they dealt with a very hostile environment. Again, they passed that test, were able to win that game pretty comfortably in the end. So I think they look at that and say, hey, we did that last week. Why can't we do it this week? Yeah,
most definitely. And I agree. I think, you know, the confidence from the Vandy offensive lineman, that's, you know, how you have to approach it. But I think from a South Carolina standpoint, you know, they have to be like, who is this to saying that, you know, like they're meh, right? Like who? So I think they have to, you know, South Carolina is certainly going to ignite a spark. This is one of the matchups where you find anything that any other guy says and circle it, put it up big on the billboard or anything and go for it. It's going to be a chippy evening.
I think we're getting to the point. We'll discuss the chippiness a little bit later. I think we're teetering on the point where Vanderbilt could start becoming a hated team, which, again, you've for the longest time – you felt sorry for them, right? I mean, let's think back to when they beat Alabama last year. I believe that was the same day that Carolina lost to Ole Miss, because I remember getting back to my car and just sitting there watching the last, 5 minutes of the Alabama game, on my phone, because I couldn't believe what was happening. We'd, followed the score. You're like, hey, Vanderbilt's still leading this thing. It's almost over. And, I think everybody, with the exception of Alabama fans, was like, heck yeah, Vanderbilt, good for you, you know, patting them on the back and stuff like that. Because, again, they've been the doormat for so long, and it was interesting to see them finally get one over on a big dog like that. But if they keep on winning, then people say, man, I can't stand those guys. I hate those guys, because we only want the underdog to be so successful, right? And Vanderbilt, 2-0 start. Again, Charleston Southern BT. We'll see how good they end up being, obviously. But, you know, if they end up being a solid team in this conference, they could finally start actually being hated by a fan base other than Tennessee.
Yeah, Tyler, it's all fun and games, so they come to your town and beat you, right? And I think, you know, a lot of the, start of the hate for Vanderbilt starts from the Netflix documentary. Everybody I've talked to is like, oh, my goodness, Diego Pavia was running his mouth on the documentary. I can't stand him. Like, oh, if he played for us, it'd be awesome. It's like same old, right? But you watch that doc, and if he's not playing for your team, you're just going to be like, oh, my goodness, this blatant confidence. Where is this coming from? At Vanderbilt, are you kidding me?
If you take him and put him on Alabama, and he's Alabama's quarterback saying those same things, you're like, yeah, okay. That's what you should say when you're Alabama's quarterback. But being at Vandy, it's almost like people want to, you know, smack him in the face and say, do you know where you're at? Do you know what school you go to? You're supposed to be really bad, and you're supposed to, you know, go 1-7 in conference play and maybe upset somebody every 10 years. You're not supposed to be this good, type of thing.
Right, absolutely. And I don't know, I think it's good for the SEC, honestly, that Vanderbilt is good. You know, it wakes up, I guess, the Floridas, right? You know, it forces more urgency on Florida and other teams like Arkansas and the rest of kind of the SEC who thought, you know, there was always a permanent bottom of the barrel. No more.
Well, and it further illustrates how, you know, wide open this conference can be this year.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying Vanderbilt's going to make
college football.
Yeah, I'm not saying Vanderbilt's going to make a run at, you know, the SEC championship or anything, but, you know, you look at the start they've got off to. Mississippi State just beat, you know, a playoff team from a year ago in Arizona State. Kentucky played a heck of a game against Ole Miss. I can't tell you who's going to be the worst team in the SEC right now. I think it's going to be Kentucky, but I can't say that definitively as of yet. So that whole middle ground to low end of the SEC seems completely wide open right now.
Yeah, I'm with you, Tyler. I thought Mississippi State was going to be by far the worst team in the SEC, and again with a huge win against Arizona State. Again, Kenny Pickett sending a gauge 8 on the last play of the game, and again one of the coldest double moves we've seen in college football. Oh, gross! And so you know, got all the separation he needed for that last second touchdown. Stark Vegas alive again, and you know, there's life there, I guess. But it's interesting. The bottom of the SEC is honestly kind of a high bar this year.
And we'll get into this a little bit later. Maybe it's Florida.
Maybe Florida.
Maybe Florida falls back down to the bottom again.
Right, like maybe the Billy Napier experience, like and to be honest, like I don't know if anybody can really put up to the pressure of when that house is crumbling down on you. Like,
Oh, yeah.
right, like that's one of the most, I guess, put the pressure on you when you're losing fan bases in the country. So I don't know, it's a hard thing to handle, and maybe the wheels fall off and Billy loses the locker room. Who knows?
Well, on the complete flip side of things, the least amount of pressure is put on the Vanderbilt coach because your level of expectation is only so high. And like I said this last year, that when they beat Alabama, that bought Clarkley like 5 years.
Yep.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, no matter what happens this year, the next handful of years, he can still go back and say, hey, I had the biggest win in school history against number one. That's going to carry you. Now, again, I think they're going to be a consistent program, of being solid to maybe good, because Clarkley's finally got his identity established in that team. But that's the difference between a place like there in Florida. You beat a number one team at Florida, it's like, okay, do it again next week type of thing, where Vanderbilt, it's like you can ride the coattails of that a little bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And Clark Lee, an alum too, he's got that working for him, and he's got Vanderbilt exactly, the kind of football program that he would want, right? I was exposed to him up in South Bend. He was the defensive coordinator up there when I was in high school and whatnot. So running a tight ship, I like to make that pun too, obviously with the Commodores and everything up there in Nashville. But he's got them right where they want. And, honestly, like if they can continue to be a fun team and upsetting people, we might see Clark Lee at Vanderbilt for a while.
Absolutely. We'll continue to talk about Vanderbilt as the hour rolls along, dive into their unique offense and what concerns that could give South Carolina's defense, as well as how Carolina's offense is going to hold up against their defense. We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the Halftime Show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave on your Wednesday on the Game. It's all right here for our friends over at Old Timey Meat Market. Another home game coming up this weekend, which means another opportunity to get out and tailgate. By the way, the weather looking really, really good for Saturday. Once again, at least in the afternoon. Hopefully the rain stays away later on in the day. But you got to get yourself down to Old Timey Meat Market and get all the meats you need to make your tailgate experience truly unbelievable, as they've got their shelves stocked with various cuts and grades of beef, pork, poultry, seafood, and exotic meat. Their selections are always fresh, never frozen, competitively priced, and of the highest quality. Of course, you can go to Old Timey Meat Market in St. Andrews, South Congaree, and of course, my neck of the woods out in Lexington. Old Timey Meat Market, quality selection, and as always, a cut above the rest. Welcome back in. It is the extra point. Tyred, it's not the extra point. Dang it. Well, there goes one in the jar. We were going to have a jar of, like, every time I got the show name wrong.
Yeah.
So we're going to fund. Now, Dave, what are we funding with the jar every time I get the name of the show wrong? What are we funding for you? What do we need you to buy? Do you remember? I said every time I get the show name wrong, we're going to put $1 in the jar. What are we funding for you for that again?
Fixing my car.
That's right. Yeah. His Beamer's broken, so we need to
I heard about
fix
that.
his Beamer.
Yeah,
so there's another $1 in the jar for that, Dave.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's a halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. Tyler, Joe Machika, and Captain Dave hanging out with you. Reminder: Carolina calls tomorrow night, with Coach Beamer, 7 o'clock, right here on the game, as he'll give his final thoughts ahead of Vanderbilt, coming up on Saturday, and a lot of interesting things about this Vanderbilt team, because again, Pavia is kind of the central focus, but I think it's even more important to note why Pavia is so successful, because again, he's not a NFL caliber quarterback, right? Like, there's a reason why he came back to Vanderbilt and fought the NCAA for that extra year of eligibility, because this is kind of where his football career is probably going to end, right? Because he is a guy whose ceiling is college football, but he's in a system that is perfect for him. He's in that Tim Beck spread option type of offense that uses a lot of window dressing, a lot of eye candy, moves guys around, does a lot of horizontal kind of stuff, and really makes you have to be perfect on defense to keep it in check. And if you go back and watch how they played against Virginia Tech this past weekend, they razzled and dazzled them a lot in that second half. Really, they never had to punt. The only time they gave the ball away was when they had the punt and the fumble early on in the game. After that, they never had to kick the ball back to Virginia Tech. So a very efficient offense, and one that Carolina is going to have to be very, very disciplined to try and slow down.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. It's a really razzle-dazzle offense, and the way that this defense has played these first 2 weeks gives you every indication that they're going to be ready for it. But I think you have to be disciplined on weeks like this, right? Again, with all that window dressing, with all of the fakes, the play action stuff, and also with the ability of Pavia with his legs, you got to be disciplined. You got to set the edge. End's got to set the edge. You got to be disciplined in the run game. Take your cues, do your job, and let the game breakers break the game. With Dylan Stewart and the rest of the guys.
And one thing that Vanderbilt is so good at is owning the clock. Right. They're what they had against Alabama, they held the ball for like 40 minutes out of that game last year. They're averaging about 32 minutes time of possession so far this season. And I imagine a lot of that's because they just had really quick drives and scored quickly against Charleston Southern in week number 1, because they dominated the second half against Virginia Tech last week. VT had one possession in the third quarter of that game, bookended by 2 Vanderbilt touchdowns, which the second one they ended up taking the lead and ended up cruising to a victory from there. So I look at, Carolina's offense that went 3 and out on its first 3 drives last week. You do that against Vanderbilt, by the time you possess that ball for the 4th time, it could be like maybe 4 or 5 minutes to go in the second quarter, and you could be down 2 or 3 scores.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. If everything goes right for Vandy in that first half, you'd have to make some adjustments at halftime. But this offense, again, like it's been the narrative going into the week. Like, can they find enough consistency to put up with this defense, or like to keep up with this defense? You got to stay on the field, right? Give these guys a break. I think time of possession is going to be one of the stats we look at the end of this football game to kind of determine success. Could be wrong. But I think, it just depends. It really depends on whose defense is, again, getting the opportunity to refresh. And even if, you're and obviously you want to take points whenever you can on offense, I think, in this game. But also defensively, you want to bend, don't break.
And one thing that Vandy did last week was stay committed to the run. They were having a little bit of success in the first half, but they blew their doors off in the second half to the tune of 199 yards. And talked about yesterday, it was averaging like 7 yards a carry, throughout that entire game. But they kept hammering it and kept hammering it and kept hammering it. And one thing, when you dominate the time of possession, especially if the other team's offense isn't on the field very long, you tire out defenses very quickly. And we talk about in those second halves where, hey, if Vanderbilt is holding the ball for 7-8 minutes minutes at a time. The other offense is going 3 plays and out or 5-6 plays and out and giving the ball right back. Well, by the time that defense gets back on the field, they're gassed. And if you're running it right down their throat, guess what? You're probably going to have more success.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. You have to find success in the run game in the SEC. It's the MO. And again, defensively, I think South Carolina, you want to stop the run game first for Vanderbilt next to containing the quarterback. But I think if you can stuff the run game and force Diego to kind of, get outside of himself, have those riskier downfield plays. We know how good this defense has been traditionally at forcing turnovers, especially on tip balls, stuff like that, and, fumbles and whatnot. So, if you can kind of force this offense outside of itself a little bit early on in this game, you're going to have momentum, especially, going into the first half, second half.
And obviously, from the other side of things, we're going to need to see South Carolina's offense be successful against what I think is the best defense they've played up to this point, so far this year. And obviously, all that starts with the offensive line up front, which we talked about. Hopefully they have the communication issues figured out and stuff like that. And I hope you can run the ball, quite frankly, because if you can't run the ball, then you become one-dimensional and a lot easier to figure out. But I really hope this is the week they take that step forward and show the ability to have a consistent run game that you can rely on throughout the day.
Yeah, selfless football, Tyler, is the run game. Everyone's got to do their job, and, pretty much everybody but the running back is blocking, right? So, you got to find your role in the run game, stick your block, make sure it's on time. And these running backs got to have some patience in the run game too. Wait for these blocks ahead of them develop. Try not to bounce it outside before, you have a lane, and, just stay disciplined with it. Trust your reads and trust, the blocks in front of you.
Watching the Virginia Tech Vandy game a little bit yesterday, I did notice one thing, and again, Virginia Tech's offense was completely shut down in the second half to the tune of 21 yards, but when they were having success in the first half, they were doing a lot of outside runs and quick throws, which are things that we've seen, especially on the scripted drives like against Virginia Tech in week number 1. We've seen Shula like to do. Now, he kind of got away from that through the rest of the game, and we saw the struggles on offense from there, but that's something that I could see VT was having success with against this Vanderbilt defense, and I almost wonder if that's kind of the MO for what Carolina should be doing on Saturday as well.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. I expect, a similar style, right? Getting Lenoir's warmed up with a lot of, running the football. If you can find success running the football, get those chunk plays, 5, 6, 7 yards, it's going to open up the short passing game, and then eventually the deep ball, as we saw against Virginia Tech. So it's going to be there. You got to just have to stay disciplined on offense. Do the little things right early on in the game because, again, this team knows it. Options will open up later down the field.
Well, and you can, if you're still not getting that push up front to be able to run up the middle, you can use that short passing game essentially as your run game, which can still set up some things a little bit farther down the field. So, I don't know. Those are things that I would like to see them potentially try to exploit, coming up on Saturday. And again, like in the scripted drive against VT, it worked perfectly.
Right.
And I almost kind of wonder if that's going to be the same kind of things we see Saturday from Mike Shula.
Yeah, most definitely. I think Lenoir's is certainly capable of running some RPOs too, run pass options, giving him, the choice on that, trusting his reads. Those are the kind of flashy plays to let 16 make that gives him the confidence going further into the game and, also helps him lock in, I guess, later, but, helps your offense keep going too when he's making the plays.
It's going to be a tough game, no doubt, and might end up getting a little bit chippy as well. Just how chippy and what does one national expert think this game is going to be equated to? We'll discuss that coming up next as we wrap up hour number 1 of the Halftime Show, presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave hanging out with you here on your Wednesday on the game as we turn our attention to the college football weekend ahead and all of our focus obviously on South Carolina and Vanderbilt. 7:45 kick over at Williams-Brice Stadium. I hope it kicks at 7:45 this time. I said earlier, the weather looks great. I said the same thing about this past Saturday, and we know what happened. I really hope we don't get a situation like that again because, and for Dave's sake alone, we don't need him hanging out until 6 a.m. on Sunday morning again.
Yeah, absolutely. For Dave's sake, I hope we kick this game off on time. But as is September in the South, you never know when it's going to rain. It's pretty much through August and September, I've learned. Rain can kind of pop out of nowhere. So, absolutely, hope this game starts on time and the student section isn't out there just waiting for football for a while in the rain.
Well, when this game does get started, we expect it to be close. We expect to be competitive, and I think it might be maybe a little chippy as well. And our guy, Josh Pate, I thought made an interesting comment earlier on this week on the artist formerly known as Twitter X when he says, let me tell you about a straight-up war coming this Saturday nobody's talking about, and that's Vanderbilt at South Carolina. I don't think, and again, I think it's our mindset of being preconditioned not to think of Vandy as this tough kind of scrappy team, but given how they played last year, I think that makes a lot of sense, and maybe people are just overlooking this, but I could see this being, maybe a little bit of a chippy type of game on Saturday.
I think this is going to be a chippy, scrappy game, Tyler. Just the way that Diego Pavia talks straight from the dirt, son, is like his, I guess, catchphrase, if you will. That's just kind of inviting for, somebody to, take his head off, if you will. Sure. It's going to be chippy. I don't know. There have been a lot of chippy games in college football history. I don't know if this one's going to, live up to any of that. But I think from a South Carolina standpoint, if it does get chippy, you just find the right moment to make your point across. You don't need any cheap shots, anything like that. And if it does come, you do it at the right time and, avoid the personal fouls or too many personal fouls in this one.
I think you do have one element of how games can become chippy with a quarterback that does like to talk a lot, and Diego Pavia has done that. And again, I respect the competence. I don't have a problem with it, but that's bulletin board material on this side of things. And he's talked about circling the Carolina game when he was on Bussin' with the Boys a few months back. And I don't know of any specific comments that he's made this week, but, I'm sure there are other things out there that they can kind of use about, just him having the confidence that he's the best player on the field each and every time he goes out there. And, whether it's rational or not, you as the other team are always going to use that as your fuel and your motivation. And if you feel like somebody is, disrespecting you, go out there and tee off on them.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past Justin King and creative media to find something or a lot of things from this Vanderbilt team and Diego Pavia to energize this squad, this South Carolina squad. So good things happening over in creative media for sure. But yeah, I think, there's a lot to circle. And again, from South Carolina's standpoint, you just got to play within yourself. This defense is mean enough. It hits, hard enough. Bring the intensity. And the game should do the talking. You got to stay within yourself, even if it does get a little chippy. You can't let it get personal and just make the play. Can't get outside yourself and let the flags pile up. Yeah. It's bad.
And you mentioned the flags there because Vanderbilt is a team that's one of the more flag-heavy ones in the SEC right now. They ranked 11th overall, averaging 9 penalties a game and just shy of 70 penalty yards per game. And I don't know how many of those are just procedural penalties or personal fouls or whatever, but they're a team that does tend to draw a few more flags than even what South Carolina does, and they've had their own issues with flags so far to start the season. But we obviously know SEC crews are not against throwing flags, and we'll see how many of those get thrown on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Again, you got to stay within yourself, but I think there's a time and a place. Like sometimes the big hit is going to get flagged, and if you can limit it to that, and hopefully nobody gets ejected, and we'll get to some ejections later, I think too.
Sure.
But as long as nobody gets ejected, it should be fine, right? And as long as the penalty doesn't come in a real costly spot, but let your talking happen within the field, but certainly see this one getting chippy for sure.
One thing that you have to worry about with a quarterback like Diego Pavia that is going to run a lot is those hits that come from on the sidelines, right? Where he's kind of straddling, tight roping, and maybe he steps out right before again J.R. Johnson comes over there and hits him. And look, J.R. Johnson's not looking down at the ground at his feet. He sees a guy with the ball that he wants to tackle, and making sure you're not giving up unnecessarily 15-yard penalties penalties or getting, fouls assessed on yourselves and stuff like that for those plays that could be, kind of borderline there on the side. Because, again, we know officials tend to err on the side of the quarterback with those kind of things, even if he did kind of step out a little bit late there. Because, again, if I'm running at you full speed, I can't always stop on a dime and avoid hitting you.
Right.
But, again, you're going to lose those battles a lot of time when it comes to officials.
Yeah, you would hope the officiating is going to be tighter than what we saw, I guess, in Texas with the linebacker just going straight for the helmet. I don't know if you saw that clip. I would assume the officiating is going to be a little bit better than that, but you got two quarterbacks that are running the football in this game, and obviously South Carolina's quarterback, Lenore Sellers, a little bit stronger, faster, and bigger than Pavia. But again, if this game gets chippy, you got to watch out and make sure you get to the sidelines instead of sliding and putting yourself in danger. Because again, guy can always come over the top if you're sliding, and bad news.
No, I think we're all interested to see just how much Lenore Sellers actually does run in this game. That's something that's not been as prevalent through the first couple games, and maybe it's hey, we don't want to get him too dinged up before conference play starts, but you don't need to hold anything in your back pocket this week. Like, this is where it gets real. This is where these games count towards your conference standings. If you have anything that you've been holding back, now it's time to unleash it.
Yeah, I agree, Tyler. This is the week that you let him go and give him the option, those RPOs, the option to kind of let him, keep it, with his feet, let him do the things that we saw, him literally like veering into contact on the goal line against Virginia Tech. I think we'll see a lot more of that. But then again, as the game goes along and as it gets chippier, as we're talking about, you might have to tone it back a little bit. But he's certainly capable with the size and that strength, like we talked about coming out of Virginia Tech, to carry the football effectively.
We'll talk more about Vanderbilt as the show rolls along. Coming up in hour number 2, we know Billy Napier's on the hot seat. Who could take his job? Who would actually want the Florida job? We'll dive into that coming up next as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina rolls along here on your Wednesday. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave on the game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show, hour number 2, presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, hanging out with you here on the game. As we're starting to get set for week number 3, we can dive more specifically into these matchups coming up tomorrow, but a better overall slate, I would say, for the SEC this upcoming weekend. We had some good games in week number 1, obviously high-profile games like, Texas and Ohio State, LSU and Clemson, and for the most part, everybody kind of reverted back to playing cupcakes this past weekend, though some teams like Georgia and even South Carolina had tougher games than we thought they were going to against some of those easier opponents. The only conference game this past weekend was Ole Miss taking down Kentucky. But this weekend, you have some intriguing matchups. It's crazy to me. Oklahoma's going to Temple for some reason. It's still weird to me because, like, Alabama had that trip to USF 2 years ago. Right. Missouri played at UMass either last year or the year before, which was bizarre.
Yeah.
Kentucky plays against, like, Toledo on the road sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, that's always weird to me when SEC schools go on the road to these small schools. I still don't.
They're playing at the Link, though, in Philadelphia.
Well, because that's where Temple plays.
Again, I was going to say,
that's their home venue.
School, but then you're playing at the freaking Link.
Yeah, and, like, I do a lot of Oklahoma fans travel for that to where it's a good crowd? Or, like, because when you typically watch, like, Temple games, I mean.
Is Philly a destination?
They're not even half full there, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, some of these teams that play in NFL venues don't even, they won't even sell the upper deck. It's just like the lower bowl and it's half full type of thing. So I don't know what kind of crowd OU is going to be playing in front of, and I imagine it'll mostly be OU fans because they got fans everywhere.
Right.
I don't know if Philly's a destination for them or not.
Maybe. I don't know. I could see them filling that place pretty close to full. I don't know if it will be entirely full again because you're lacking some excitement there on the Temple standpoint. But you could see some Sooners go check out Geno's, Pat's,
Maybe
all the touristy cheesesteaks, do the whole tour. Maybe catch a Birds game.
Do they have barbecue in Philadelphia? They have their own version of barbecue?
I'm sure they do. Yeah, we got
because then the people from Oklahoma can try their barbecue and tell them how awful it is.
Right. Yeah, and then they can be like, no,
we do it better out in Oklahoma.
Get a steak.
Yeah. So you got that. Perhaps the most interesting non-conference matchup is Wisconsin taking on Alabama. Again, Alabama. Well, the most interesting non-conference matchup is A&M and Notre Dame, but the other one is Alabama taking on Wisconsin, which I liked the effort that I saw out of Alabama last week against ULM, but again, it's ULM. This will be a little bit better of a litmus of, okay, how do you do against, and it's not a team that's going to be as good as Florida State, but a more quality opponent in Wisconsin, and what does that mean for a couple weeks from now when you take on Georgia? That's kind of the tone I'm interested to see how they set.
Right, yeah, me too, Tyler. Tickets as low as $14 in Tuscaloosa for that game against Wisconsin. That shows you how that fan base feels about how the state of things are in the Kalen DeBoer era. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think if Bama comes out swinging and looks like the Bama of old, it might be something to worry about for everybody else down the road. Again, good litmus test for them there. Notre Dame, Texas A&M, obviously the biggest non-conference game in this conference, at least. A&M on the road in South Bend, so it'll be interesting to see how A&M holds up there too.
That was a game last year. Notre Dame won in week number 1.
Right.
That was before they lost to
Northern
Illinois, NIU. Yep. Sorry. So yeah, big game for them. Obviously, I was very impressed with Notre Dame in week 1, despite coming up short to Miami. And A&M's played some. They've won, but they've played. It was UTSA in week 1 and then Utah State last week, but they've allowed a lot of points. Like, they've allowed these other teams to score on them, and I'm intrigued to see how Notre Dame might take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough atmosphere up there in South Bend, and yeah, A&M's defense allowing a lot of points. I don't know. I think if A&M loses this one, they're kind of the big upset bid team as the schedule goes along. After Notre Dame, they've got to go, or their home game at Kyle Field, against Auburn, so that would be another bounce back win and kind of keep them relevant as they roll along through Mississippi State, Florida, and Arkansas before they go to Death Valley for LSU. So A&M, I mean, even if they lose in South Bend, they've got a real chance to stay relevant as they have to host South Carolina later on in the year.
Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia, the kind of marquee game of the weekend up there in Rocky Top. Game day is going to be there, 3:30 kick on ABC, and again, Tennessee has exceeded a lot of people's expectations early. Georgia didn't look great last week taking on Austin Peay. So I think I think this game maybe establishes the early front runner in the SEC. Again, I think LSU might be the best overall team in the SEC right now, but this is the first, at least as far as conference play goes, the first definitive opportunity for somebody to win a huge game.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. I think this is both teams are going to be good. I think we're going to walk away from this game being like both teams are really, really good. You know, this is kind of the Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, I guess, of the slate, this early on slate of college football. You know, two powerhouse programs, again, that look, rare and ready to go back like them old selves. And we'll have to see. I think, I think Georgia is probably going to have the edge in this one simply because, we really don't know how good or the ceiling is for Georgia, and we certainly haven't seen it, I guess, with Tennessee quite yet either. But I don't know. I give the slight advantage to the Dogs. Gunnar Stockton proving like, he has been in this system and he knows what he's doing.
Well, things do not get easier for the Florida Gators coming off their loss to South Florida as they'll head into Baton Rouge, taking on number 3 LSU, 7:30 on ABC. If Florida plays the game that they played last week, this could get very ugly very fast.
Yeah, I agree, Tyler. This one could be really, really ugly, and they'll echo the Fire Billy stuff, and we'll see the president come out and be like, nope, we're holding on to him till the end of the year again, until he eventually winds up getting fired, in the middle of the year or something like that. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Florida, that fan base is loud, and I think they're going to be a lot louder if Brian Kelly, and the Tigers, have their way in Death Valley.
So Sporting News put out this article the other day coming off the heels of the loss to USF. This was done by Bill Bender of Sporting News, of the best candidates to replace Billy Napier if they do end up firing him. And there's some names on this list that I feel like I can say with a lot of confidence are definitely not going to take this job. And I'll start off with the one that always pops up, Lane Kiffin. Right. I don't think there's any way, unless they just absolutely back the Brinks truck up to him, I don't think there's any way Lane Kiffin takes this job. He's got it made in Ole Miss right now. They had a down year last year. Nobody was ready to run him out of town with pitchforks and torches or anything like that. Like, he's in a good place, and he's not dumb. He understands the pressure that comes from a place like Florida, and I don't think Kiffin's going to subject himself to that. Yeah,
I don't know if you would necessarily do it in Florida, but then also, you factor in the Alabama job too, but then you look at how those fans are treating Kalen DeBoer at the moment too. So it's, two high-pressure jobs that he's going to have his name in, the conversation for, and I think Lane's going to pick, it might be either one of those jobs or not. Like, it kind of just depends if he wants to deal with all the heat that comes with it. Like, and I think he would want, to coach somewhere else other than Ole Miss. But, I think with the way that these blue blood programs fans are reacting, like, I don't know if you want all that pressure and also deal with the board at Florida.
Another coach on this list is Dan Lanning, who, of course, is at Oregon, has been there for, this will be his fourth year being the head coach out there. And, look, I know Willie Taggart left for Florida State. I know that Mario Cristobal left for Miami. I think in what is now the NIL era, where the money that you have can determine how successful you're going to be, I don't think anybody's using Oregon as a stepping stone anymore, especially not Dan Lanning. He's got something cooking good up there. He's got more money than he probably needs to build the talent roster that he has, and he also understands the pressure of what it would take to be the Florida coach and the constant scrutiny you're under that he doesn't have as much of out there at Oregon. There's no way he leaves Oregon for Florida.
Yeah, no shot Dan Lanning is leaving Florida, or leaving Oregon for Florida. He's got the endless Nike bag that Phil Knight has given him. Just reach in, grab all the money that you need for your team, and then go for it. I think, Oregon's established itself as also a blue blood that's, kind of competing with Florida, obviously, at the top of college football. Like, they've established themselves in the Chip Kelly era. You kind of saw the heights that you could go. And so Dan Lanning, he has to take his lumps, in the playoff and from a coaching standpoint, but he knows Oregon's right there knocking on the door for a national championship.
One name, though, that I do think is interesting, considering what happened last week, is Alex Golesh, the South Florida head coach, who has done a really good job in a short time of helping turn that program into something respectable and picking up one of the biggest wins in program history this past weekend over Florida. And we know now, I guess it's becoming more of a trend. Instead of the hot shot coordinator hire, you go out and hire that up and coming like G5 head coach to kind of take over your program. And if South Florida ends up being as good as we think they can be, and I think they got a really good shot at making the college ball playoff this year, Alex Gold should probably go to the top of that list.
Yeah, I agree, Tyler. I think this is the hire I would make if I were on the Florida board. He went to the swamp, beat you, and then I think, there's no better way to take your lumps, by hiring the guy, that essentially, ended the last guy's, tenure at your university. He's at South Florida. He's been able to turn that program around very quickly. He's an offensive mind. I think it would go hand in hand at Florida, and, certainly would have, a good chance to live up to some of the expectations down there with all the momentum that he's got right now.
That would be a crazy situation of, hey, the coach that potentially got one coach fired ends up taking over his job.
It would be a complete 180 from everything Florida's done too, right? And like they've always been like, no, it would them taking their lumps and being like, all right, this guy got us. Like, it would be very, opposite of what Florida's been doing. And I think it's the right hire, honestly. That's who I would hire, at least if I were, down in Gainesville.
Because I think it's important to remember, like, Florida is still a top tier job, right? I know the success hasn't been there in the past handful of years, but like, if we were not talking about wins and losses, not talking about, this or that, if we're just purely ranking things off the quality of what the job is, Florida's still one of the best in all of college football. Always has been and always will be.
Yeah, and it seems like there's an endless swamp of money down there, if you will. I think, they're one of the premier programs. Again, what Urban Meyer did with, Tim Tebow kind of established them as a blue blood, quite literally. And I think, they're going to keep fighting and always consider themselves one of the best in college football, which is why they're looking at talent like Dan Lanning and Lane Kiffin. They assume that the Florida job is above, all these up-and-coming jobs as we see.
Sure. Again, Napier's not been fired yet, but we don't think things are going to be trending in the right direction for the next couple weeks. So be on the lookout for more of these hot board lists as that seat gets hotter for Billy Napier. The Big 12 did something interesting over the weekend in terms of disciplining an officiating crew. And I think a lot of other conferences can learn from this. We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's our Ed and Joe Machika hanging out with you here on The Game. All right, welcome in. Halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. It's Joe Machika, Captain Dave, hanging out with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. I like accountability when it comes to officiating, which is something that unfortunately in all sports we don't have enough of, particularly in college sports. However, I do like what the Big 12 has done in terms of making sure an officiating crew knew they screwed up. So if you're not aware of this, over the weekend when Missouri and Kansas played in the reignited border war, the crew working the game was a Big 12 officiating crew, which, of course, Kansas is a member of the Big 12 Conference. After Missouri scored a touchdown, the Tigers were flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct. Kansas blocked the extra point attempt, and then the ensuing kickoff was deemed illegal because the Big 12 officials allowed a punt to occur on a free kick instead of just traditional kickoff where the kickoff was moved back 15 yards for the personal foul or the unsportsmanlike conduct foul.
Right.
Here is Eli Drinkwitz, cut number 31, Dave. Eli Drinkwitz was asked in his press availability yesterday on if he knew he was taking advantage of that rule when they did it on Saturday.
We just wanted to see if we could. You know, it's like asking your parents if you can do something that you know they probably shouldn't let you do, but sometimes they get it wrong.
Was anything said during the game?
Yeah. Yeah, we told them they'd screwed up a lot of stuff in the game. That was just one of them. Yeah, no, I mean, kudos to Coach Link. He asked if we could do that just because we had seen him in pregame really struggle with the sun and the fielding punts, and knew that was only allowable after a safety. That's the only time you get a free kick. Other than that, you have to use, you can either drop kick it or use a tee. So they said yes. What were we supposed to say, you know?
See, I even felt like I knew that, right? Where you can free kick after a safety, but if you get assessed a penalty after a touchdown to where the kickoff line is moved, you still have to kick it off, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I feel like, yeah, it's one of the basic rules in college football, and I don't know how officials miss that. And thank God they added the public, I guess, shaming, if you will, or the public punishment, if you will. Finally, some retribution for some officiating, because we don't get to hear about it, right? Like they send in the complaints, and there's no further, I guess, shaming or any news or developments on bad calls or anything. Like I'm sure this fan base would like to hear the results of the South Carolina LSU game last year.
Sure. So this apparently violated Rule 2, Section 16, Article 6 of the NCAA football rule book, and now that Big 12 crew that worked the game have been removed from their next schedule assignment coming up on Friday. And I got to say, round of applause to the Big 12 because your crew messed up. They clearly, allowed something to happen that shouldn't have happened. That Eli Drinkwitz says, we knew we shouldn't have done it, but let's get away with it, of course. So that sets a bad precedent for what this officiating crew may allow to happen, right? So you have to get this under control, make sure they understand the rule book, which, again, that's scary to think there are officials out there that don't understand the entire rule book by letting something like this happen, but they've been removed from their upcoming game because of it. And I feel like this is a level of accountability we haven't seen enough, especially in college sports.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. Again, I think it needs to, carry throughout the SEC. I'd like to see the SEC, set a precedent too. Again, it's and shout out to Drink too for taking the loophole when it's available, right? And then talking about it, because it's not his conference officials. He doesn't have to worry, about the SEC coming after him and talking about SEC officiating like that. So yeah, all credit to Drink for exposing the rule, and then I think more conferences should take note of this, and and even it helps alleviate some of the, all right, what are they like? Are they doing anything about all these these missed calls, like, and helps with some transparency behind the scenes, I guess.
And this was a call that obviously didn't drastically alter the outcome of the game, at the end of the day. So it was pretty inconsequential, but still, the fact the Big 12 is looking at this as saying, hey, you screwed up a blatant rule, then you need to be held accountable for that. I will say it's a little different when you're talking about, a situation like what happened last year with, South Carolina and LSU, because that's more of a judgment call type of thing.
Right, true.
Which, again, how do you deem what judgment is worthy and what judgment is not through the eyes of an official? That's where things kind of get a little bit messy. But when you have procedural things that you mess up, and look, the SEC probably screws up a lot of procedural things too. It wouldn't shock me. Like, that is where you definitely have to put your foot down. And I would say, let's look back to the Texas and Georgia game last year where there was a pass interference call against Texas that I'll even agree was not the correct call to make, but regardless, the flag was thrown on the field. It was announced. The Texas fans were not happy. They proceeded to throw trash all over the field, and it delayed the game, which then allowed the officiating crew to pick up the flag, which you're not supposed to do. That is something that can't be reviewed. It can't be overturned. Once the flag is dropped and it said so-and-so pass interference, that's it. Regardless of if you look back on the tape and it was wrong, what's done is done, because that can be overturned. But the SEC crew did overturn it. To my knowledge, there was no, hey, we're going to suspend those guys for a week because they clearly messed this up. No accountability outside of a statement from the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the SEC is going to probably remain that way because I don't know if they want to, make the statement and I guess to have the accountability or the bad look, if you will. But I don't know. Maybe the Big 12 setting the president will start for, or lead with the president of, a conference is starting to do this, announce when officials, aren't doing it because it happens. It's just not necessarily announced or statements aren't necessarily made.
I'm definitely very much in support of that because I think it makes your game better as a whole. And look, I get it. These officials aren't full-time as much as I would like them to be. They have other jobs and things like that. But if I know that, I don't know how much you make on a weekend, as an SEC official, but I know that I might lose out on my next opportunity to make that money if I egregiously screw something up in this game, I'm probably going to be more on my P's and Q's, making sure I understand the rule book and I'm calling things right.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And as much as you wish, these guys were full-time, and that's obviously the goal somewhere down the road. But, I think right now, if you're an official in the SEC, you're going to be on your P's and Q's. You're going to, be reviewing the rule book a little bit more, obviously, with the Big 12 doing this. And obviously, there's still the chance for suspension and stuff like that and reprimanding if you miss a couple calls and stuff like that. But, you've got to be on your P's and Q's if you're an official. And shout out to the Big 12 for, setting a good little precedent there.
Again, I'd like to see more of that across the board because, again, now maybe the judgment calls are something that are a little bit more tricky with that. But if you're definitely screwing up basic procedural things, there's no place for that in the game. Again, it didn't really affect the outcome of the game because, Missouri ended up winning pretty comfortably, by the end of the thing. But that's something that if you're a conference, you can't let your officials continue to get away with.
Absolutely not, Tyler. It's something you got to, put the foot down. And again, it was a very public thing since Drink was talking about it in his post-game presser. So good for the Big 12 for, making the statement and, publicly doing that because it was a very public thing. And if it just kind of poof, they just suspended him and nobody heard about it, everyone would be clamoring, what happened to this? What happened to that? Like, what's going on there?
Speaking of punishments, the NFL has finally handed out its punishment or deemed what the punishment is for Jalen Carter after his spitting incident almost a week ago in game number 1 of the 2025 NFL season. We'll dive into that coming up next as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina rolls along on your Wednesday in the game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's all right, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, with you here on your Wednesday on the game. It's hard to believe it's almost been a week since the NFL season started and the bizarre game that was between the Eagles and the Cowboys that also had its own weather delay. And I guess that should have been the omen for the weekend that was to come in terms of the delays and all that kind of stuff. Now we're going to sweep across college football, including South Carolina. But the big story of that game last week was not the Eagles winning and, continuing on after their championship last year with the victory over their rivals. It was Jalen Carter spitting on Dak Prescott. And not just that, doing it before a single offensive snap had happened. One of his teammates was down on the opening kickoff, so there was a prolonged period of time where everybody was just kind of standing there, and words were exchanged, and Dak, who spits a lot apparently, spat on the ground, and Jalen Carter believed that he was being spit at, so he responded by doing it himself. But much like we see all the time, when there's physical stuff on the field, it's typically the guy that goes second that ends up getting the punishment. Now, again, Dak Prescott did not spit on Jalen Carter, so what Carter did was a lot more egregious, and he did it in front of the official, which, you're not going to get away with that.
Yeah, lesson be learned. I mean, it flies in the NFL too, where it's always the second offender. No matter if you're the guy that started it, it's always the second guy that's always going to get dinged for it. Spitting in the NFL, obviously no place for it in sports and everything like that. But I don't know. I heard Jeff Saturday talking about it on a podcast this week and said it's kind of abnormal. Dak, obviously spitting on the ground. Jalen Carter spitting in retaliation, and we've seen it kind of around college football, and no real place for it in the game or anything like that. And it's not something that we've seen a lot of really either.
Sure.
Kind of around the game. It was only recently that it's kind of popped off, I guess, and it's always been a form of disrespect, if you will. But
of course,
spitting on each other in the NFL, I guess, is in football starting to become a thing. It's gross. Well, it's nasty.
We didn't think it would only be 48 hours later when Florida's defensive lineman would get in trouble for it. That would lead to them losing that game against South Florida because that was a valuable 15 yards for the Bulls there on their final drive. Now, the NFL announced yesterday that Carter's ejection from week 1 would essentially serve the purpose of whatever suspension they were going to levy towards him because he didn't play a single snap. He was out there to play his first snap of the game, got ejected, missed the entire game. So that kind of sets the precedent that, a incident like this will get you a 1-game suspension. Also has to forfeit his game check and all that kind of stuff, which, by the way, it's crazy to look at the fact that if he had played that entire game, Jalen Carter would have made $57,222.
It's insane.
Like that's a year's salary, if not more, for most people, and he makes that for
just 1 year.
3 hours on in this case, a Thursday, but a Sunday more often than not.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. These athletes, these salaries are crazy big money, especially in the NFL. And when you're a first-round draft pick, obviously we're talking about Lenoris's prospects of him possibly going to the draft. Some of that first-round money is sweet, man. It is a lot of cash, and it's hard to turn down for sure.
Yep. So Jalen Carter has already served his suspension in the eyes of the NFL, and I'm really surprised because I thought they were going to come down harder on him, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the way that the league is putting an emphasis on cracking down on taunting this year. And, I mean, that's not necessarily taunting, but it's still something that...
Celebrations.
It's not even a celebration either. It's just like it's showing disrespect to your opponent in a much more egregious way that obviously got him ejected from the game. But I kind of thought they were going to make an example out of him, right? Because, and no less doing it on national television in front of one of the biggest Week 1 audiences of all time to do this, and this be the story instead of the game itself. The league has to have hated this, right?
Oh, most definitely, Tyler. But I think, you look at what happens, I guess, or the amount that it's happened recently. If it becomes a recurring thing, I think the next guy that does it is probably going to get, the gavel in a couple more games. But considering it's Philadelphia, considering it's Jalen Carter, and considering he was provoked by Dak and they missed it, they didn't flag him for it or anything, and now Dak didn't spit on him.
Yeah.
But it was clearly intentional. Like, if you look at Dak going back to the huddle, he's looking down at it and, trying to rile up Jalen Carter, and that's when Jalen Carter gets the idea to go spit on Dak, I guess, if you will. So I don't know. I think, Tyler, I think the reason why they don't come down, I guess, as harshly on Jalen Carter is, kind of freak incident. Haven't seen much of it. But the next guy, I think, is when they really they put the gavel down.
There shouldn't be a next guy.
Right.
I'll tell you that much.
It's the NFL.
And I think that also kind of ties into what we were saying about Billy Napier a little bit earlier on in the show, that not even 48 hours removed from this happening on the biggest game of the entire weekend in terms of viewership and people paying attention, with the Eagles and the Cowboys, one of your own players goes out there and does this, because I would think after that on Friday, in everybody's team meetings, no matter if you're offensive lineman, defensive lineman, receiver, back, cornerback, kicker, whatever, every single coach is drilling into their players' heads, do not do this. See what happened to him? I better not see that on my team. And I'm assuming Florida wasn't one of their teams, or if they were, Brennan Bett didn't get the message because he went out there and did it.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I would think, and then kind of goes to show you everything Billy Napier has going on, brewing down there in the swamp. Like, it feels like he's lost the locker room yesterday, right? And so I don't know. I don't know if you can call it like uncanny in Florida, right? Because that's just kind of the direction the program's going. But yeah, I don't know. I would think every other coach in the country saw what Jalen Carter did, like you said, and just was preaching that like to no end at the walkthrough on Friday and whatnot.
How do you feel about the NFL cracking down on taunting this year?
On taunting is one thing, because I think it's bad for the game to taunt in excess, but I don't know. They're also cracking down on celebrations too, which is why I brought it up. Like throwing the excessive celebration on the Colts guy for that pick. And granted, he was doing a lot. Like the celebration extended on 30 seconds later, but I don't know. I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but I also think them cracking down on taunting allows them to crack down on big hits without directly cracking down on big hits and the way guys are hitting people.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, the taunting, as long as you're not doing it at your opponent, like, again, if you hit somebody big and you're standing over them and all that kind of stuff, those are the things that have always been penalties.
Right.
Again, I don't like if you're starting to incorporate, hey, I made a big play, I'm celebrating, and the opponent just happens to be in front of me. Like, those are things I don't like to see, because the NFL tends to, like, overdo it. Right?
Yeah.
Say, hey, we have an emphasis on this thing, and especially early in the season, they just throw flag for it, because they're trying to prove a point and get everybody used to it. So I hope we don't step over the line too much with this, though I am afraid we will.
Right, I agree, Tyler. And what they're taking out of the game is kind of the edge, right? Like, the villainy of the other teams and stuff like that. Like, and I think that's good for the game too. Like, how the heck are you going to hate another city or have a rivalry if you take out some of the taunting and just essentially eliminate it all in general? Like, it's going to lose a little bit of swagging. Granted, the NFL owns you regardless, but I think some of these traditional rivalries might lose some of their swag, their flavor, if you will, if some of the tauntings penalize all the time. Like, there's going to be a little less juice in some of these rivalries.
Yeah, we'll certainly see how that plays out over the course of the NFL season. Week number 2 gets started next week with Thursday Night Football, which you can actually listen to here on the game with the Commanders and the Packers. I think we're early enough in the season where that will actually be a good game, because once you get into like mid-October and teams are starting to wear down a little bit, that's when Thursday Night Football turns into what.
Yeah, absolutely not good football, Tyler. Yeah, right. Like, so I don't know. I think it'll still be good football. 2 really good teams. Jaden Daniels, really exciting to watch down there in Washington, and then you have the new look Packers defense and Jordan Love and everything that they're brewing up in Green Bay.
Yeah. So looking forward to that this weekend. You also get Eagles and Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch. I think that's 4:25. Either, I guess, Fox if it's a 4:25 game coming up on Sunday. We'll see if the Chiefs can actually hang with the Eagles this time.
Yeah, most definitely. I don't know. We'll see. I don't foresee them, because there's still Patrick Mahomes. All the help around him still suspended or hurt. So I don't know. I think the way that the Eagles defense has been playing, Jalen Carter being back, it's going to be fun to watch. I think he's going to be pissed off. Wrecking the game up there. I would give it to the Eagles, but we'll have to see the Chiefs. The Mahomes magic. I don't know if the NFL is going to let them lose 2 games in a row.
Yeah, we'll see, because they had some interesting circumstances on how they won a lot of games last year with things really going their way. And I'm not a tinfoil hat kind of person, but I could see where people would draw those conclusions based on how some of the games went a year ago.
Good sports city in Philadelphia, definitely going to put on the tinfoil hat if this game happens to magically not go their way. I know there's certainly an Eagles fan in Columbia that would put on her tinfoil hat.
She would.
If this game slipped away a little bit, but I don't know. I think the Eagles too powerful, returning as much as you did from last year. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There's just not enough to love in Kansas City right now, and it's going to change. And you still have 15 doing what he does, but I don't know. I give it to the Birds.
So that's coming up this weekend. We did have a couple of heartbreaking losses this past weekend. Which one is worse to deal with? Your team losing to a last-second field goal or missing one on your own? We'll discuss that coming up next as a wrap-up hour number 2. It is the Halftime Show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's our head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, along with you on your Wednesday on the game. Welcome back in. Halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machiki, Captain Dave, wrapping up hour number 2 here on your Wednesday on The Game, talking a little bit of NFL after a very entertaining week number 1. So Preston and Elijah in the mornings do something called 50 Ways to Lose a Football Game, because there's a lot of ways you can, get to the point of losing. Florida did one of them this past weekend with just how undisciplined they played and making stupid mistakes as the game went along, especially there at the end. And I don't think they've gotten to last-second field goals quite yet. And the NFL, we saw a couple of examples of 2 ends of the spectrum in terms of how to lose on a last-second field goal. The Ravens lost to the Bills on quite literally a field goal as time expired. A fire drill field goal, no less, because the Bills didn't have any more timeouts, and they had to trot Matt Prater out there as the final seconds were running off the clock to make the field goal to win the game 41-40, which was a scoregami, by the way. And scoregami's still not tweeted about that. I don't know.
I think he's a Ravens fan.
I've seen that speculation of does this mean he's a Ravens fan and is just upset about it? Because now he tweeted about Monday's game with the Bears and the Vikings, but he which wasn't a scoregami.
Was not. Didn't
was
finish,
not.
Right.
Yeah, that was 27. 17 was that final score.
So
it's pretty
27-24, yeah.
27-24, one of those.
Yeah.
Because the Bears got that last touchdown.
The game was over.
It's a very common score.
Right.
But yeah, for whatever reason, he never tweeted about Sunday Night Football. I thought it was a bot, honestly. I thought it just did it automatically, and there's some kind of algorithm that you don't have to actually tweet yourself, but maybe he is a Ravens fan. I don't know.
I think he's a Ravens fan, yeah.
But that was obviously a crushing loss for the Ravens as they blew that lead with a couple minutes to go. And then you had early on in the day, the Falcons, who lost by having a missed field goal that could have sent the game into overtime by Younghoe Koo after the Bucs had missed their field goal on a touchdown a few minutes before. And that, the field goal from the Falcons would have tied the game and sent it to overtime. Which loss is tougher to swallow as a fan? Your team watching the other team kick a field goal to win, or your own kicker missing his opportunity?
Your own kicker missing his own opportunity by far. I'm victim of the double doink.
Ah, yes, Cody Parkey.
Yes, because you have a guy who's certainly capable of doing it. Right, NFL kickers are usually pretty good. Right, and you trot him out there. You're like, all right, he's got this. We have the ball's in our court. Right, we are going to win this football game. And then when he shanks it once, I guess, and then it's like, all right, it's going. And then he's aiming for the upright, bounces off the upright, missed. It's like, oh, no. But then he, the double doink, obviously you guys know how it goes. He tries it again and then hits the other upright and denied once again. Like that it's the worst in sports, I think, to lose on your kicker missing a field goal because the ball's in your court versus the other team being on the other side of it. I guess, you can kind of see it calm and the defense is kind of letting you down as they trot into, field goal range, and then, it kind of softens the blow. I think, you're this close to winning a football game, and if your team's got it, so I don't know. I will always err on the side of your kicker missing it is worse.
That makes a lot of sense because you are in control, and most of the time, NFL kickers, very accurate. Even if it's a longer kick, you're in the league for a reason because you're supposed to be able to make kicks from all over the field. I mean, God, Chris Boswell made a 60-yarder for the Steelers on Sunday. It wasn't at the buzzer, obviously. It was about a minute to go, but that helped them obviously win that game. So you're kind of naturally inclined to think that just about every kind of kick is going to be made. Seeing the other team kick, though, does hurt a lot, right? Because you're almost out of control. You have no control. Yeah, you can block the kick, which the Ravens nearly almost did with Kyle Hamilton on Sunday, but it's that hopelessness of knowing that, hey, this guy's probably going to make it, and you're going to have to watch it with the faint hope that your special teams unit can maybe get a hand up and knock the thing away. That's pretty gutting as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you, Tyler. And I guess, I don't know, I would always err on the side of, taking it's like the lottery ticket that he misses, right? Like the other team and how much, joy you have after that. Like it's one of the biggest and exhale situations you can get in college sports. And so, I don't know, I'd always be on the receiving end of it, or at least in college, because college kickers it's a whole different ballgame, right?
Yeah.
Like I think it factors in argument, or it changes the argument a little bit. I think I'd rather be, on the other side, the receiving side of it. But I don't know. It's both tricky situations. But having my kicker, have one of the worst, field goal misses of all time, I'm always going to err on the side of I want the other team kicking.
Do you ever look away, like when your guy's lining up, where you just can't watch it?
I mean, I guess in the lead up to it, because it's all right, you're just showing we know what's happening. You're just you're trying to stack on as many announcers' jinxes as you can in the lead up to the kick as possible. So yeah, sure, I'll look away leading up to it, because I mean, what the heck are we doing? Just get it over with. Trot him out there, let's go. But for the kick, no, you gotta watch it just in case what you want happens.
There's nothing. And again, I'm a very superstitious person. There is nothing worse than your own kicker trotting up there and the announcer goes, well, he's made his last 18 kicks in a row, or he's never missed from this portion of the field between 40 and 49, and he's perfect this season, or something along those lines. You go, well, he's gonna miss it.
Right. It's the announcer's job to add good context to it. And with kickers, there's not a whole lot to love, to talk about special teams. There's a lot to love about special teams, but not a whole lot to talk about or add context. And really, the only context that you're adding with a kicker is, is he going to make it or is he going to miss it, right? Yeah. So, I don't know. I feel like there's just the added level of the jinx there.
Yeah. You'll get that little graphic of, so-and-so kicker is, 12 for 12 in fourth quarters and overtimes on game-winning kicks or whatever. And when you see that, you're like, well, this is going to be his first miss. That's just how these kind of things go.
Right. It's the announcer's job and the truck's job to find the good stats about the kid. You're not going to put up his misses or anything like that. So unless it's he's missing a little bit. So I don't know. It feels like they try to stack on every single jinx possible, and it only adds to the moment. But certainly would rather have the other team, I guess, kicking for the win.
Well, hopefully we're not in a situation where we have to watch anything happen in the last second Saturday night against Vanderbilt, as hopefully Carolina can win that game pretty comfortably going away, and you're not having to chew your fingernails off in those last couple minutes, though. This is a Vanderbilt team that is scrappy and could have the possibility of making that the case.
Yeah, I would think the South Carolina team's going to do their job, and certainly on special teams, we've seen the returns and all the power, from kicking. I would expect to see maybe a block. I wouldn't put it past them. They've done just about everything else in the special teams facet. So watch this team to kind of go after, block something like that. You need it against Vandy. Shake the game and keep momentum on your side. Going to need it.
Yep, absolutely. We'll dive back more into Vandy coming up in hour number 3 as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina rolls on here on The Game. It's all right here for our friends over at Pro Swing Columbia out in Forest Acres and in Chapin. So many great things happening there all year long, and I'm very excited to tell you about their fall leagues, which are coming up here in a couple weeks. The first week of league play kicks off September 29th through October the 3rd, and it's 12 weeks of play at either of the locations out in Forest Acres or Chapin. That's anytime or dedicated league nights, advanced booking required per week. They also have flighted play for a level playing field. If you have any questions about this, you can give them a call at 803-528-1617. And of course, you don't have to be a part of the leagues to go take part of their Golf Zone simulators, which allow you to play at courses all over the world. You can check them out online and book as well at proswingcolumbia.com or call them at 803-592-3916 for more info. Pro Swing Columbia out in Forest Acres in Chapin. Welcome back in, hour number 3. Halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, hanging out with you here on your Wednesday on the game, navigating you through the middle of the week. Of course, Carolina and Vanderbilt coming up this Saturday, 7:45 kick. Pre-game coverage starts that afternoon with Gamecocks game day at 2:30 with myself and Terry Ford out of Jay's Corner at the corner of Rosewood and Bluff. So come by and hang out with us, grab some food, and get set for the first SEC game of the season. We talked about Vanderbilt a little bit earlier and kind of assessing what they are compared to years past. As you said, it's not your dad's Vanderbilt team anymore. It's not even maybe even your older brother's Vanderbilt team anymore, because this is something that's new about them that we haven't seen in quite a while, and Carolina's riding a long win streak over them that we hope to see continue this weekend. But Coach Beamer was asked, or not even asked, before he even started taking questions yesterday, gave his scouting report, and this will be cut number 1 here, Dave, gave his scouting report on Vanderbilt ahead of Saturday's matchup.
I got a really good Vanderbilt team coming in here, certainly the best Vanderbilt team that we've played in my time as the head coach. They're improved from last year, brought back 8 starters on defense. They've been in this system now for a while. They've got really good players on defense. Obviously, Pavia at quarterback makes them go. He brought back all of his top weapons. They went out in the portal and got a couple of receivers that have added an element to their offense. They seem to be more explosive in the passing game than they were last year. And 3 new offensive linemen that have come in from the other schools as well. So they've made their team better. They were already a good team that has added to it and has gotten better since last year, coming off a great win at Virginia Tech on Saturday night. They're really good on special teams. They always are, year in, year out. They've got multiple dangerous returners. They've got a guy that returned a kickoff for a touchdown last year against Tennessee to open the game. They were about one game-saving tackle or touchdown-saving tackle away against us from last year. Last year, returning a kickoff that we made a tackle on, or that one about popped out of there. So we've got a big challenge from a special team standpoint, and a ton of respect for Clark Lee and the job that he's done there. They're tough, they're physical, they're well coached. It's evident when you watch tape with the challenge that they will be. But our guys are excited. They were in a hostile environment, meaning Vanderbilt, last Saturday night in Blacksburg, Virginia, against Virginia Tech, and they handled it well. But we need to challenge our fans to make sure that Williams-Brice on Saturday night is even more hostile than what they faced in Blacksburg last Saturday night. We need them as well, but should be a beautiful night for football.
And again, this is a Vanderbilt team that is different than what you typically deal with, and one that you, in years past, don't give a lot of thought to. And I think we all have been conditioned when you look at the schedule, you see Vanderbilt, W, always. And again, Vanderbilt doesn't lose every single game every single year, but you just always assume that they're going to be the worst team in the conference. But now, in the past year, and here's the thing, I don't know past Diego Pavia, and if like Tim Beck were to take another job and take his offense with him, if Vanderbilt continues on being successful. But for now, they have a window of success. They have a window to capitalize on what they have experience-wise, what they have scheme-wise, and they're doing that right now.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. Again, as we mentioned, not your daddy's Vanderbilt, not your older brother's Vanderbilt. This team is talented across the board, and obviously credit to Tim Beck, the OC. But Clark Lee has gotten down there in Nashville and really righted the ship, if you will, pun intended, with the Commodores and everything. But they're really, really talented. Diego Pavia has had really, really good big rise to fame, if you will. It started with his upset win against Alabama. We were talking, he got in there and talking all this talk for Vanderbilt, right? A team that South Carolina's beaten 16 times in a row. An opponent traditionally you overlook. And I can remember, at least in the first couple of years of Shane Beamer's era, the game against Vanderbilt where Zeb Nolan had to come in and lead the final drive. And, you were wondering, it's like, is this the closest Vanderbilt's ever going to come to beating South Carolina? No. Well, coming into this season, it looks like this is going to be a pretty close game. And again, this is the most high-powered Vandy team I think we've seen ever, arguably.
No, absolutely. And I think back to just 2 years ago when they came into Willie B in November. That was the game that Carolina got there before Vakari Swain's 3 this year. The most recent special team score where they had blocked the punt, ran it in, and Carolina was already up big at that point in time. The game was already out of hand. And we saw Sellers in that game because Carolina had put up so many points, and it was such a significant advantage there. He had a 36-yard touchdown run in that game. So to go from there then to now, where this is being looked at as a pretty exciting matchup, and again, it's being talked about nationally. Vanderbilt is on the cusp of getting themselves ranked if they're able to win this weekend, which is something that does not happen a lot for them. And obviously Carolina is trying to get themselves back into the top 10 after falling out, going from 10th to 11th in the latest AP poll here. So there's a lot on the line here. And obviously it allows one team to start the conference 1-0 and one team to be 0-1.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And there's, as loud as the quarterback is, Diego Pavia, there's always going to be, a lot of circling and a lot of he said this, they said this, going into this one. But fully expect both teams to be ready to play on Saturday. It's going to be, tough. It's going to be physical. It's the first, a chance both teams get, at an SEC opponent. So each team, clamoring to make a statement. Like this is a big tilt, Tyler, we got on our hands on Saturday. Yeah,
it absolutely is. And you have a coach that in Clark Lee that I feel like has put his identity into this team.
Yeah.
Again, he's a very focused guy. Disciplined guy, not somebody that, you're not going to get the best quotes out of him, right? You know what I mean? He's not a quote machine. He's not somebody that's over the top or outlandish or anything like that. He's very kind of driven, understands what point he's trying to make, and makes that happen. And while we talk so much about Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia, you feel like the defense kind of takes on that identity of him. Very focused, they're very experienced, very deep, and one that could give Carolina's offense some fits.
Yeah, certainly. Everything I saw, growing up, I used the DC in South Bend as I was coming through the ranks in high school up there. So I saw a lot of, his brand of football with that defense. And it's a very disciplined, very, confident in their ability, very attention to detail, detail-oriented. It helps that Vandy's kind of, the military school as well. You're doing all that. But I think, it's just really, really hard, tough-nosed football. They know what they're capable of if they can execute. So South Carolina has to bring in, that same mindset, match the energy that Vanderbilt's bringing in. And I think, it's going to be a tough, hard-nosed matchup. Like both teams play really, really hard and really, really fast. So it's going to be a good one, Tyler. Really hard, really fast, really good football.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, you're going to have to make sure you take advantage of every single opportunity to get to possess the ball because you might not see it a ton, and because that's kind of the way that the offense is designed there for Vanderbilt. So you can't miss your opportunities there. It can't get off to a slow start either.
Right.
And that's my concern is, Carolina in game number 1 against VT, hey, you drove down the field, boom, 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 scored a touchdown pretty quickly. And then after that, did all of nothing for basically 2.5 quarters on offense, really until the, Harbor touchdown late in the game against VT. And then, of course, the majority of the first half against SC State last weekend, you also did all of nothing, save for a field goal right there at the end, before you went into halftime. I don't think you can afford to do that against a team like this because if you find yourself in a hole, it's going to be really hard to dig out of.
Yeah, can't come out complacent, especially in front of your home fans. I think, Vandy has, if any team on this schedule that's going to come into Williams-Brice that's going to take the life out of the crowd early, I think it's Vandy. And you can't let that happen. You can't let them get off to a good start because then, your whole advantage, at least for the first half, I would think you'd be able to flip it to some extent in that second half unless, you continue to come out flat and everything, but your whole advantage is taken away in that first half if you come out slow and you come out flat. Like the crowd is going to match that. They're going to do their best to try to get you back on pace, but South Carolina is going to have to control the tempo, control the momentum in this game.
Yeah, and obviously if you can establish a good run game in this game, you're going to have the opportunity to control it a little bit better. And obviously if you can bleed the clock yourself and also limit the possessions that Vanderbilt has, that could play into your advantage too. It's just a matter of doing it, not saying it. Because again, Carolina has tried to run the ball, and we know, we've heard the comments from people on our phone line and text line frustrated with Shula's insistency to try and run it up the middle when it's not working. But when you're trying to establish the run game, you tend to kind of keep going back to that well over and over again, and it hasn't worked consistently as of yet. And if you get that rolling on Saturday, that would be a big help.
It would be a massive help, Tyler. And, I think this run game is they're a couple, seconds off of blocking and stuff like that, right? They were hitting the blocks, they were just hitting it a little late. I think everyone needs to play selfless football, focus on your role, right? And these running backs need to have some patience too. Let the play develop in front of them. But I think, establishing the run game is something Shula, you always want to do in the SEC, but you certainly wanted to do against SC State. You certainly didn't want to, show everything that you've got to expect the quarterback and Lenore Sellers to get involved a lot more early and often in the run game a little bit more because you need to establish those different kind of looks against this high-powered Vandy defense.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into a little bit more of what Coach Beamer had to say yesterday when talking to the media. May also work in some of the stuff from Case and Henry and other players, as well as the halftime show continues, presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's all right, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, on your Wednesday on the game. It's all right here for our friends over at Tilly's Warehouse, the first wine and spirit store in 5 Points in the past 20 years. Locally, family-owned and operated, right there behind the Salty Nut Cafe on Green Street in the old Pavlov's building. It's a hard place to miss. I've been in there. They have a huge selection of everything that you could want. Yes, Tilly's does have G4 tequila. They also have things like High Noons, Sun Surfer. They also have the Garden of Black vodka as well, which 25% of contributions go to the Garnet Trust, which go into South Carolina's official NIL collective. And all things that you could want for your weekend, your party, your tailgate, and everything in between. You can stay connected with them on Instagram and Facebook, or go online to their website, TillysWarehouse.com, for more information and discover why Tilly's is your new must-visit spot over in 5 Points. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. It's our Ed Joe Machika and Captain Dave along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Again, we focused a lot on Vanderbilt, but I want to get back into some of the stuff that Coach Beamer talked about yesterday in terms of his own team. We talked about the offensive line communication issues, which, again, I know they're working hard at in practice, and hopefully that's going to be corrected this week. But the other two facets of the game when it comes to special teams and defense are doing what they need to do as of right now. And Coach Beamer, cut number 13 here, Dave, talked about the execution of his team on special teams.
Certainly our return game's been clicking. Vicari's back there with a lot of confidence right now, but I've been pleased overall. We've punted the ball well. I thought Mason, I didn't mention that the other night, but Mason did a really good job of, flipping field position when we were backed up and we didn't get a first down offense, so when we had to punt. He did a nice job of punting and flipping field position. William, that was a great kick that he made before the half on the 2-minute drive to get points before the half. Our kickoff return team with Nick back there, I feel like has been good. Disappointing penalty that we had the other night. So I like where we are right now, but at the same time, we know the challenge really steps up this week. These guys are good on special teams. They always have been. They've got dangerous returners. They're aggressive with what they do from coverage units, whether it be, fake punts in their past or fake field goals, and they know what they're doing. And they put a lot of pressure on the opponent with their schemes and you being able to, adjust to what they're doing, but then still try and stay aggressive. So we've got a big challenge this week, but, that's life in the SEC, and our guys are excited about it.
And, in the first two games of the year, it's all been Vicari Swain, but the punt returns have really kind of broken the game open for Carolina. You were in a tight game against Virginia Tech. It allowed you to pull away and, end up with a 13-point victory at the end of the day. You were in a tight game with SC State, and, by the time Carolina's offense touched the ball again, they were up now by, 11 at that point in time, tacked on the field goal, 14-point lead, going into the half. So it allowed you to pull away a little bit. But I feel like in a game like this, special teams could end up being the difference. And I'm not just talking about the punt return as much as we'd love to have a fourth Vicari punt return touchdown, right, as crazy as that would be. It doesn't have to be that. I'm talking about the efficiency of special teams and just executing, right, in terms of flipping field position, getting good returns, setting your offense up well. Because, again, they were backed way the heck up for those first couple of drives, against SC State, where you're limited in things you can do because of how close you are to your own respective end zone there. So it's those kind of things. And we haven't really talked about this because of the Vicari Swain stuff. William Joyce did miss a field goal over the weekend. And from my perspective, I'm looking at sideways, thought he made it. Right. It wasn't until a couple minutes later, I was like, oh, crap, he actually missed it. You know what I mean? So you need efficiency there, because every point in this game is going to count, in my opinion. I think it'd be a tight one that could come down to the wire, and you don't want to feel like, man, we left 6 points on the field because our kicker missed the field goals. Those kind of things could end up being the difference in this game. Yeah, you need William Joyce to be really, really, really good in this one. Just absolute nails, making everything, and attention to detail applies for the special teams unit as well. Mason Love has been tremendous punting the football. He's looked decent, and looks to be the next guy as the punter of South Carolina. We know he's capable of throwing the football. I always like to bring that up, because I think there could be a fake in order this week. I don't know. It's been 2 weeks without a fake from Shane Beamer's special teams unit, and we haven't really been talking about it, I guess, as much because Joe DeCamillis doesn't meet with the media, nor is he as eccentric or with the media as Pete Lembo used to be. So I don't know. It's been long overdue for a fake. I think it might come this weekend, but you do need special teams to continue to be a factor, and maybe won't have as much of a spark or a shock and awe factor as with Vicari Swain's returns, but still need them to be lethal as a unit on Saturday. Yeah, it's one of those kind of things where maybe you didn't want to put a lot on tape in the first 2 weeks, but again, what could end up being a dogfight on Saturday, maybe you need to bring something out of the back pocket, to make something crazy or make something special happen. Yeah. why not break it out? So I'm not gonna put my money down and say it's gonna happen, but it seems like the type of game where it could.
Right, absolutely. And I think, this would be the game to use it, Tyler. I don't know how to, with Vanderbilt talking all the smack and everything, what is one thing that South Carolina, has been really good at? You talk about the Beamer ball, the special teams. Haven't seen a fake in a while, and it's been a signature for these teams, in years past. So I don't know. I'm not saying I'm expecting a fake, but this would certainly be the week to do it, to put it on tape. And I don't know if Vanderbilt's been watching it. I'm sure they're prepared for a fake, but you haven't seen one yet out of this team. So certainly keep your eyes open and wouldn't be surprised if you see one.
One thing that we know is going to be good this weekend for South Carolina is their defense. And when you have a good defensive front, you have the ability to contain quarterbacks like Diego Pavia. Cut number 17 here, Dave. Here is Coach Beamer talking about the 11 TFLs that his defensive front has already been able to get so far this year.
They've all just elevated their games, and they knew. Obviously, Dylan's coming back. We lost Kyle Kennard, and there's a great opportunity for the other guys. We've got good players, and they've been around our program for a while. Brian Thomas, JT Gear, Desmond, those guys are doing a nice job. Damon Clowney came in and did some nice things the other night. So got good players that have elevated their games, and then I think that Clayton and our defensive staff have done a really good job of designing things, knowing that teams are going to start every week game planning. How do we not let number 6 wreck our offense, and staying ahead of the curve and not letting teams do that. There's going to be times where they take Dylan away. Yes. Well, there's now an opportunity for 10 other guys to go make their impact on the game. And then you guys have watched us closely. We've moved Dylan around. He's been in different places. He's not always in the same spot. So we can continue to put him in situations where teams have to adjust to where he is and what we're doing.
So, again, the defense has played well. And, again, credit to them, because I think coming into the year, or I don't think I know coming into the year, that was our biggest concern is, man, you're replacing as much talent as you lost last year, to the NFL. How are you going to be able to do that? And, again, we don't know how good Virginia Tech's going to be. They're looking like they're trending towards being another bad team in the ACC, and then you played SC State. So this could be the opportunity to really establish, like, hey, this defense is really good. This defense is legit, like they were a year ago, by containing a team that last year you were able to keep in check. And I know Diego Pavia was banged up in that game, but they really did a good job. I think that was the only multi-score loss they had up to that point, I believe, Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
So you did a really good job of keeping him in check and not letting Diego do what he had done to other teams earlier on that year. And if you could do that again on Saturday and say you win the game by 14 points or something like that, then I think a lot of people will be able to firmly plant the flag and say, yes, this defense has not fallen off from a year ago.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. This defense needs to stand on its Q's and its P's and its Q's, if you will. They've been playing really good football. Unfortunately, you don't have the no touchdown streak to kind of bring into this one and to hold as your chip on your shoulder. But there's plenty. I mean, this defense will have as still holding the chip of nobody thought they were going to be any good because they lost so much. That chip has been working pretty good for this defense as of late, and I think there's a lot of dogs on this defense that are came into the year not being talked about, and they're ready to keep making a statement. Fred J.R. Johnson, one of those guys that as a freshman overlooked. Maybe from a recruiting standpoint, South Carolina gets one of those guys that overlooked recruiting and leads the team in tackles in his debut. I always kind of go back to that because it shows you the kid's ready, and he's also a freak athlete and ready to go. You're going to need everything from this defense in terms of detail-oriented to compete with this offense. This offense has a lot more firepower, a lot more talent on it. So going to need to stay disciplined on all your cues and play your role, this Saturday.
I am concerned with the amount of injuries you've had,
right?
Especially in the secondary, because you got really deep into your bench on Saturday. And, Beamer said yesterday that he wasn't going to update injuries because we're going to get our first availability report coming out tonight, which I'm sure is going to be riddled with a lot of questionables on that, which will probably involve a good amount of guys that are playing in the defensive secondary. You've got a much more efficient downfield throwing Vanderbilt team than you had a year ago, and that's something that concerns me. Like, hey, they could exploit where you're maybe weak right now, and that could end up being a long day for the defense. I hope that's not the case, but that's something that does kind of stick out to me as, hey, well, how's this going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, you can't afford for communication to break down in your secondary. We've seen that with Shane Beamer's teams happen. And you know, it's routinely when you're, you know, dinged up the most, but I don't know if there's enough like talent like dinged up for this to become a big issue. Obviously communication can break down and that's always the problem, but I think, you know, it's something they need to focus on with as many guys. If they're going to be rotating guys in there and not have as many consistent, you know, forces on this defense, they have to make sure that communication is taken care of and solved between everybody that you could see in the game.
Yeah.
Like, you know, be prepared to play with just about anybody in that room and make sure your communication between you and that guy is comfortable as ever, because you're going to need it in a raucous environment on Saturday night.
We'll get more insight into Vandy coming up next. As earlier on today, Chris Lee of VandySports.com joined us on the Takeover Hour to let us know more about the Doors. I can let you listen to that conversation coming up on the other side as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina rolls along on your Wednesday here on The Game. It's all right here for the mortgage guru, Jacob Crowder with First Palmetto Bank. If you're looking for a mortgage guru, Jacob Crowder has got you covered. He's helped so many 107.5 game listeners, can help you as well. And we at The Game personally recommend him. Owner and operator right here in the Midlands, Jacob has local decision makers, which means quick and precise processing and underwriting. If you're looking to make a move, give Jacob a call at 803-719-1005 or email him at jcrowder@firstpalmetto.com. Interest rates have stabilized as well as local housing market, and now is as good a time to buy a house as any. Jacob Crowder and First Palmetto Bank have products to help home buyers. If you're considering building a home, they have no-nonsense construction loans that fit your needs as well. Again, give Jacob a call at 803-719-1005. His MLS number is 198432. And First Palmetto Bank is a member of FDIC and an equal housing lender. All right, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you on your Wednesday here on the game as we start looking ahead to Vanderbilt this upcoming weekend. Talked about him there in that first segment, and we now welcome in on the AAA Heating and Air phone line from VandySports.com, Chris Lee. Once again, Chris, we appreciate your time. As always, we mentioned at the start of the show, a lot of hype and vibe around this game that feels like a big game on our side. How's it feeling from the Vanderbilt side of things going into this weekend?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the biggest game Vanderbilt's played in a while. I mean, there's a lot of goals on the table for Vanderbilt. I think winning the Virginia Tech game put Vanderbilt on schedule to get back to a bowl. You know, if it's going to get to a better bowl, or even as some of the players have been talking about all summer, get to the playoff, then this is one that you really need to have. And, you know, but that's always been a tough ask for Vanderbilt to beat Carolina anywhere.
Hey, Chris, it's Wes. Appreciate you taking the time, man. Obviously, this is a Vandy team that brought back a lot of their key players from last year. But for those who maybe have not paid attention, you know, other than Pavia, who on this group, like kind of that, I guess, 1,000-foot view of the team right now, what were the spots where pretty much everybody came back, and are there a couple of positions where it's the other side, like they kind of had to replace a lot of players at that spot?
Well, I mean, they replaced a lot of people. They lost both of their starting safeties who were older guys, but they replaced them with some pretty talented guys. C.J. Hurd for Florida Atlantic, who's had a big impact. He's had an interception and I think a sack so far in big spots for them. But, I mean, and even where they replaced, which was mostly on the offensive line, they've got 5 graduate transfers there, guys. 4 of those guys are new, and one of them is a tackle from last year from Liberty who moved inside to guard. So they've got – Phil Steele had them coming into the season as the oldest team in the country. I really don't know why people weren't talking about that more, especially when you're old in the trenches. Which they are much bigger than they've been. So, you know, in terms of replacing guys, they didn't lose a ton of key guys except the offensive line in those 2 positions. And frankly, the transfers they brought in are better. You know, I think one of the hallmarks, it's not necessarily a team that's loaded with superstars, although they do have some really good players. But, man, it is really deep. I cannot tell you this may be the deepest Vanderbilt team I've covered. I think it's premature to say it because – they haven't played the South Carolinas, the LSUs, the Alabamas, those guys yet. And so I don't want to be premature there. But, like, when you go to fall camp and you watch them, which we're allowed to do, and you're looking at the 3 at some spots and going, man, this guy would start for them a lot of years. It's been kind of a different era for them with this team.
Chris here. Thanks for taking time to join us, man. So along those same lines, like, that's one of the things that I think got lost. And maybe, frankly, it was because, hey, it's Vanderbilt. We want to talk about Pavia, and that's about it. But I think we saw here last year for South Carolina, yeah, they had Sellers, they had Stewart, they had a lot of talent, but they were also very old. I mean, I think last year's South Carolina team had, 30, 35 seniors. What is that figure for Vandy? I had someone tell me the other day maybe it was in the 40s, I think, in terms of seniors, fifth-year seniors, grad-type guys.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it up a few weeks ago at Vandy 24/7. It's in an article if you find it. I don't want to go searching for it while I'm trying to talk to you and lose my train of thought. But, like, it was an astonishing number of, like, graduate transfers and seniors. You know, and sometimes that figure can be a little misleading. There can be, you know, walk-ons who never play that are listed as seniors. But, like, actual dudes who play – like when you peruse their depth chart, which unfortunately is not up on the site at the moment, I was going to reference that too. It is glaring, like how many juniors, seniors, and graduate guys I have. It is a large number.
Again, talking to Chris Lee of VandySports.com. Of course, last year coming in with Pavia was Tim Beck, also from New Mexico State, bringing in that spread option offense. And with so much experience coming back, and Beamer alluded to this yesterday, that, you know, they're getting a lot better at throwing the ball down the field, more explosive pass plays than they had, or on track for more explosive pass plays than they had a year ago. How much more from an efficiency standpoint have you seen this offense improve this year compared to last?
Oh, it's crazy. And again, look, I don't know how good Virginia Tech is, and I know that the team they played in the opener, Charleston Southern, with apologies to listeners, in your state is not a great litmus test for what's ahead. But they've been averaging, I think, over 8, maybe over 8.5 yards a play in each of the 2 games so far. And the difference in talent, guys, like the team they had last year was like a feel-good little engine that could kind of story. Like, I don't know how they beat Alabama or how they were in the Texas game. You know, if they get an onside kick, they got a chance to tie Texas with the touchdown on the point after, or win if they go for 2 in the final 2 minutes. They lost at LSU by a touchdown. Now, the South Carolina game, as you guys saw a year ago, that's when the dam finally started to burst. I watched that game. I'd seen South Carolina. I knew the athletes they had. I was like, this is kind of where it starts to break down, because Carolina had just so many guys in the trenches that Vanderbilt just didn't have any answer for. And that was probably their worst game too, which didn't help. But this is a very different team. Like, they've got dudes at skill positions who've got more speed than they had. Again, the offensive line, I think that was priority number 1 in the offseason. You knew that Pavia had to stay healthy this year, and that was a risk. I mean, second half of last season, he was not the same guy. Deion Walker lands on him in the Kentucky game, and he wasn't the same guy till the bowl game. When they got him healthy again for that, he accounts for 5 touchdowns. So, I mean, it's just I don't know that I'm answering the question you asked me, but it's just a much, much different team. Last year, it felt like they were just kind of getting by with duct tape and baling wire and defense for a while. This year, I think they've got guys that you really have to be concerned about.
Chris, if you can, go beyond the hype with Diego Pavia and kind of drill it down. What have you seen from him this year, maybe in terms of on-field improvements compared to what he was last year when he was obviously already pretty good?
I don't know that he's any better. I mean, the ratings, like, he's PFF's number 1 quarterback right now. He threw a bad ball last week against Virginia Tech. He didn't throw a lot last year. You still would like to have him a little less involved in the running game. I don't know if he's better or not. Time will tell, but I just think that the supporting cast he's got is so much better that it allows him to stay upright and make throws. It gives him some running lanes maybe he didn't have a year ago. I mean, they've got dudes like Trey Richardson, who had the one-handed touchdown catch last week. Like, they didn't have a guy as good as him on that offense a year ago. Martell Height, their corner, who's a 2-way player, is a really fast, explosive guy. I saw make some long grabs in practice in fall camp. And Eli Stowers is a year older and more experienced at the position. They're just deeper everywhere. And I think so much focused on him last year. I'm amazed they did what they did, because I didn't think their surrounding cast on offense was very good. This year, I don't think that. And I just think it shows you how good he is now that he's got a roster around him that looks more like SEC players. My guess is that is the
– Who's up, Chris?
I think we lost him, Tyler.
I think we may have lost him. Uh-oh.
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Did I miss a question?
No. We just, it cut off there. But
it cut off just at the end there, Chris. We got a couple more minutes, so let's bring things forward to the South Carolina game. We're still learning about both these teams, and we're going to learn a lot. I think this week's the biggest test, I think, for both of these teams. So in the last couple minutes here, what are the keys for Vandy in this one? What are the keys for South Carolina in this one? What's going to really, in your mind, determine, based on what you've seen the first couple weeks, determine who wins and who loses this game?
Well, turnovers are always a big thing. They had 7 all of last year. They had 2 in the first half alone last week, which was one reason they were down 20-10 at half. I think mistakes is a big thing. Their offensive line has committed a lot of penalties so far. But I look around the conference, I feel like that's a theme everywhere. I don't know if officials are throwing more flags this year or not, but you can't sabotage your chances. It's always been a tough game for them to win. And look, I know Carolina has not played to Carolina's potential yet, but that could happen at any moment when you've got guys like Sellers and Harbor. I think limiting the big plays. I think the one concern I have, maybe one of the biggest ones outside of those two things, is covering Harbor, who's going to be a headache for anybody. I do worry what it looks like when they face top-end receivers who can get open. I'm not sure how good their secondary is. I don't think it's bad, but it's not been tested the way it's going to be tested. So I think getting a pass rush on Sellers is going to be a big thing. I know that's something that Carolina has struggled with so far, but you're 2 games in also. Sometimes those things rectify themselves. I think those are the things I'm watching are just mistakes, and the Sellers have time to really beat you downfield and get guys open. And of course, with Carolina, special teams is always an issue, but Vanderbilt is pretty good in that regard too. So those are the things that jump out.
He is Chris Lee of VandySports.com. We appreciate your insight and looking forward to what should be a fun game Saturday night.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll get into what Casey Henry had to say about South Carolina's offensive line yesterday, as he was pretty brutally honest about what's gone wrong so far this year. That's coming up next as the Takeover Hour rolls on here in the game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. Tyler Head and Joe Machica wrapping up the day here on your Wednesday on the game. We'll talk more about Vanderbilt tomorrow, get some Clark Lee, get some coordinator sound in here as well as we set the table for what should be a fun and entertaining game ahead coming up on Saturday night. But one thing that we hope to see continue regardless of how the game goes is the winning streak versus Vanderbilt, dating all the way back to 2009. Cut number 15, Dave. Here's Coach Beamer when asked yesterday if the conversation around the winning streak comes up when preparing his team for this game.
I don't know if anybody knows. I don't talk about it. Don't think about it. I didn't bring it up with the team. I don't know if they know. It's this year has nothing to do with those previous years. I haven't been around here for every year that we've played Vanderbilt, but I'd be hard-pressed to believe there's a better Vanderbilt team that we've played during that streak than the one we're getting ready to play on Saturday night. They're good guys. They're really good. They're going to be a handle for a challenge for a lot of teams this year.
Yeah, that's an understatement. It's definitely the best version of Vanderbilt I think we've seen those past 15 years. And, a streak like that is something that you obviously want to keep going. And I don't think it's been made a big a deal because, again, more often than not, Vanderbilt's kind of not all that great. Usually not all that great, but this time is different. And again, you're able to say that you have a streak over them that a lot of schools right now currently don't have because of the way that they were able to win a couple games. Not only last year, but the past handful of years. People forget. Going back to 2 years ago now. I think it was at the end of the 2022 season where Vandy was able to knock off. Was it Florida? Florida and Kentucky, in back-to-back weeks after losing to South Carolina. So, they've beaten a handful of teams here in the past, couple of years. Obviously, the biggest one being Alabama, just last season. But Carolina, nice little winning streak over them that we hope to see continue this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I know a bunch of people in that football facility aren't just a little stitious. There's a lot of superstitious, people over there in South Carolina's football building, and rightfully so. I mean, it's 16 games in a row. You try not to talk about it because, again, it can lead to some of that complacency and, we've had, really good success because, the team that's coming in here is, again, we've been talking about it all afternoon. It feels like not your daddy's Vanderbilt, not your home, or not your big brother's Vanderbilt. So as soon as you start to look past this team, you've already overlooked them because they are really darn good.
And I think it was interesting what Chris Lee of VandySports.com, or not Chris Lee of VandySports.com, earlier on this morning, Elijah and Preston were talking to their play-by-play guy, Andrew Allegretto, and, they asked him, like, hey, from the perspective of Vanderbilt, how do y'all view this side of the rivalry, if you want to call it that? And, he said, basically no disrespect, but they look at South Carolina and say, hey, how can we not beat these guys? Like, every once in a while, right? It's been, 15 years, 16 years now. You feel like you'd be able to knock them off every now and then because Vanderbilt sees, like, okay, Alabama and Georgia, those programs are way up here. And Carolina is a little bit closer to the medium in the SEC, so they feel like they're a school that they should be able to beat at more of a regular clip than they obviously already have. And again, now this year, more confidence they've had in a very, very long time going into this matchup as well. Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. I think Vandy, again, looking at South Carolina as a team, that they haven't been able to, get over the hump for. And, this is there's a lot of motivation on the Vandy side to get the job done. And especially at Williams-Brice Stadium, it would be, very online with everything that Diego Pavia and Vandy and this new brand of Vandy football is all about. Like, hey, look, we just went into Williams-Brice, one of the toughest atmospheres in the SEC, one of the, atmospheres that a lot of people can't get the job done in, and, broke the streak and all that. And from a South Carolina standpoint, you can't let that happen. You can't give them, the point of beating you at your home stadium, and when expectations were so high for this South Carolina football team, you can't let Vandy be the one to kind of dismantle that and off-road this or rail this train, I guess, early on this season. Yeah, so should be a fun one coming up on Saturday night. Again, we'll dive into more of this, coming up tomorrow. Also kind of look ahead to week number 3 as well as across college football as we kind of skimmed over it. But there's some interesting matchups this weekend. And this is where we really start to kind of piece together what this year of college football is. And again, there's going to be a lot of parity, and I think the SEC is going to be maybe more of a wide open race than we thought it was going to be coming into the year. But now once everybody is, for the most part, beginning conference play, there's still teams that are playing out of conference games. But these next couple weeks, when you really start to understand what this league and what this conference are going to be this year.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. You've got a lot of good games this upcoming week. Week 3 is the one where you get 3 games under your belt. You don't have 2 opportunities for a fluke. Well, if you looked good in week 1, maybe looked bad in week 2, this is your chance to kind of get a median game, if you will, and see how teams really look. Looking forward to seeing how Alabama looks. This Georgia-Tennessee matchup is really good. So really intriguing weekend of college football across the conference, and we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But obviously a really, really, really big tilt here coming up at Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday night.
Yeah, so looking forward to that. Again, we'll dive back into more of this coming up tomorrow. And again, I was listening to Clark Lee's press conference a little bit earlier, cutting some things up. I thought he had a couple of interesting things to say about how they're preparing for Carolina, specific things they're looking out for, and all that kind of